watching Property TV.
Hello and welcome to Property Question Time. My name's Stephen Galpin and this is the programme where you can have your property related questions answered by our team of property experts. And joining me today is Hayley Andrews, investor, developer and CEO of Your Freedom Empire. Hi.
Hi Stephen, how are you?
I'm all right. Good trip down?
Very nice, thank you.
Well, very nice to see you. And on your right is Ben Stroud, co-founder of Grange London Estate Agents. How are you, Ben?
Very well, Stephen. Thank you for having me back.
Well, we thought we'd take the risk. No, good to see you, Ben. Anyway, I was just thinking how long it is since we worked together down here in Canary Wharf. It must be 10 or 12 years now.
Yeah, something like that. It's changed a little bit since I was last here.
It certainly has.
A few more towers.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's the evolution of a postcode. I think when we first started down here, it was still, a little bit quiet on a Saturday and Sunday. Everybody had sort of disappeared from the financial buildings and all the rest of it, and now it's just manic at the weekends. I even feel I still live here, and I sort of dread going into the centres at the weekend. It's so busy.
Yeah, it's really changed.
But what it has done, it's become yet another London postcode that you'd consider as a place to go and live, as opposed to if you were just in the sort of financial business or the IT business.
Yeah, change for the better.
Development's good. Okay. And Grange London's in Paddington. The same thing's happening there, really, isn't it?
Yeah, so we're based on Paddington Basin, just near the station, and big redevelopment. Two big landowners, British Land, European Land, who've completely changed the area since the early noughties, and with the advent of Crossrail as well, we're seeing a lot of money coming in, even more than 5 or 6 years ago.
It's quite interesting what you say there. I mean, I can remember working down at Tower Bridge with Sir Terence Conran all those years ago.
Yeah.
And you don't realise, I mean, at the time, can I tell you, we were trying to sell property down there and people would say, I'm not going over that Tower Bridge, we might not get back, I mean, it was that rough. And it took 20 years there for it to become established, for the Mayor's office to open. So quite interesting, the evolution of postcodes. You have the same sort of thing in Birmingham?
I think you do everywhere, don't you? It's kind of a ripple effect. Once you can build interest in an area, then you have people come to that area and it kind of ripples out, doesn't it? So overall.
But you know what the lesson is? Property's not a 5-minute business.
It's not, is it? We always say that, don't we?
I know. I can't remember how many times people have told me that sort of Commercial Road and the city fringes is really the hot area. Well, they've been telling me that for about 30 years. And I've not seen a lot of difference. Anyway, we better get on with the questions. And Hayley, you're first. Can the panel suggest a way I can start looking for investment properties, however, buying them directly from the vendor rather than going through estate agencies?
Oh, am I allowed to talk about this with an estate agent sat next to me?
No, you can't.
It's not under control.
Well, as much as I love you, Ben, and I think you're excellent, I do love direct vendor, and it is a topic that I could talk about for the whole of the show, let alone one question. In building a good, decent lead or a funnel, leads coming through direct from vendor, takes time. So the longer you've been in the industry and the more people know you, obviously the more leads you have coming through. But some of the things you can do to get started, because everybody has to start somewhere. Of course, is networking is always a great way. Let people know, business and property, not just property. Let people know that you're in the market to buy, what you're looking to buy. Also, other great places to find direct to vendor would be Gumtree, Open Rent, HMO register, buy, sell Facebook groups. All of these will get you direct with the landlord, and they may actually be putting their properties on the market to let. Lettings agencies are another great place for you to find off-market deals, because these people are advertising their properties. They may have a portfolio, there may be parts of their portfolio they are looking to sell. And they're great ways of getting in contact direct to vendor. So I love doing that. Also, actually, my power team bring me a lot of off-market deals. So my solicitor, just Friday, my finance broker brought me a property. He's handling a residential purchase for one of his clients, and her father is moving in with her. She's in a chain. The chain has fallen through. She still wants to complete on the purchase of her property, so doesn't want to lose it. So wants a quick buyer for her father's house. I'm viewing that tomorrow at 2 o'clock. So I get a lot of leads that come through word of mouth, people that have worked with me in the past, people know that I'm good. I say what I do, what I say I'm going to do. I can complete fairly quickly, and I'm very fair. So there's lots and lots of things you can do to really encourage more direct leads to vendors, and estate agencies are not.
I mean, so some
the only way of purchasing
some of the
property.
industry purists will say, well, when it's with an agent, it's too late.
Well, you're buying retail when it's with an agent, and obviously you're competing with on the open market. Another great place, of course, is auction, post-auction. So the properties that haven't sold, then you are looking at wholesale instead of retail, aren't you? So it's direct to vendor is definitely something that you want to target. I would say, as advice, be patient with that. It's going to take time. You're going to have to, be the go-to person within your areas. People need to know that you're good, solid, to move forward, and you do business well. So they need to. It comes with time, because people build confidence in you.
Well, it's the same thing. It comes up time and time again in this program. It's called building your team, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
So you build your contacts, you build your team. Yeah. I mean, personally speaking, I think actually buying from an estate agent, especially if you're starting off in the business, is not necessarily a bad thing.
There's nothing wrong with buying from estate agents.
They've got a lot of valuable advice. I mean, I'm only saying that because he's sitting in next to you.
Well, while the perfect scenario would be direct to vendor, and of course you can create a win-win situation and not have estate agency involved. I own an estate agency as well, so I'm exactly the same as you. But predominantly, majority of your deals will come through estate agencies, especially when you're first starting out. Yeah,
I mean, for me, joking aside, of course, I have a vested interest in a way, but my belief is it all comes down to experience and the time you've got to spend on looking for a property. Because if you're a full-time property investor, then good luck to you. You can knock on doors, you can mail shop apartments and houses, you can use social media, you can find peer-to-peer
it all takes
investment platforms, but it all takes time. And if you're experienced and you've got that time, I'm sure you can get a good result. If you don't, and you're a little bit wet behind the ears, I've heard of off-market deals where people have paid too much because they don't really know the market, and the person selling has tried their luck and didn't need to go through an agent, or perhaps they wouldn't have even made it through an agent's vetting process and passed AML. And then some poor, buyer beware, some poor buyers sort of steamed in there and got ripped off or bought the wrong thing. So and it works both ways.
The important thing is always approaching, as we always say, in a professional manner. Understand the industry you're moving into. As you say, just because it's direct to vendor, it doesn't necessarily mean you're getting a discounted price. You've got to know the market in that area.
I think the other thing, just to say, I mean, it's just a normal life principle. I think, it's not always the brightest thing to save yourself a couple of £1,000, is it? Sometimes it can be a very expensive bit of money that you've saved, and the value of advice and professional support around you means a lot, doesn't it? I think. Okay. Agree. Right, now then, Mr. Stroud, we'll move on to your question. With press reports suggesting that Purple Bricks are considering reverting in part to conventional estate agency offices, and Amazon opening their own checkout-free convenience stores, it does seem a bit like shoplifting, doesn't it, when you go in those? But anyway, are we seeing the possible saving of our ailing high streets across the UK and a return to conventional estate agency practices?
Oh, that's a very topical question. If we start with Purple Bricks, that's an interesting one, because these online-only agents that really started to spring up around, I think it's probably anywhere from 6 to 10 years ago now, they haven't really gained as much market share as as they said they would. I think Purple Bricks is something like 6, 7, 8% market share, and by now they've predicted they'd be at 30. So I think they're almost being forced to reevaluate their business model, and yes, and it'll be a hybrid approach. They'll probably choose to have agency offices in some key flagship locations that give them that halo effect where they get their brand out there. But I think they'll also, they probably won't go for thousands of or hundreds of branches all over the country. I mean, I can talk on behalf of my company, and we've chosen to go down the hybrid route in that we have feet on the ground, and we have presence in the area we work, but we work in an office, which isn't a shop front. We have a meeting room, we have a very professionally kitted out office, and we meet and greet people there, but we don't feel the need to be on the high street. By doing that, we lose walk-in business, but most of our business comes online now anyway. So I actually think that's the future. With the, if you're a big brand, you need a few flagship offices, but it's more about having office space in the right area with good people. So I don't think that the estate agents will be the savior of the high street. You'll be glad or sad to hear. I do think companies like Amazon will make a big difference, and I do think work from home will make a difference, but there'll be high streets in Birmingham and outskirts of Birmingham, in Surrey, where a lot of retailers were struggling. People now working from home for 2 or 3 days a week will cause new businesses to spring up on high street. So I think that's more likely to be the savior, in my opinion.
Hayley?
I think it depends on the audience, doesn't it? I mean, from an estate agency point of view, some people are quite happy with the lower fees and operating online, and they are very competitive in their prices, which, a lot of, I know for a certain fact that our estate agency had to evaluate the fact that our prices were higher, and a lot of the calls and people that were coming through to sell were obviously comparing those prices, seeing a like-for-like service and not really appreciating that face-to-face or in-person touch. So it depends what the customer wants, really. I think some people like that face-to-face and that in-person, and some people actually would prefer to pay a much lower fee and just get the job done. So it's a hard one to predict, really. I expected the likes of, Purple Bricks and some other online agencies, express agencies, to be a lot bigger than and grow quicker than the growth that has been recently recorded.
But don't you think, somewhere along the line, we're missing the point, really, that you buy a home, you buy a house, you buy a flat. It's a huge, huge investment these days.
Biggest, probably.
Do you not want a bit more than a few lines on the internet to sort of help you along with it?
You would think, wouldn't you? Yeah. But that's what I mean. The very reason that these express agencies have popped up is because there is demand there, and people are happy to go down that route and pay a much lower fee and lose that personal touch.
I'll tell you what I think, Hayley. Having been in agency years ago, you will know well, having an agency now, that while the market's good,
everything's great.
All you need is order takers.
Exactly.
Right? It's when the market goes and your team are having to spend all day explaining why they haven't sold a property or what innovative ideas they've got to do it. Yeah. That's where these sort of huge sort of internet operations go wrong. But anyway, look, there we are. That's all we've got time for in this half of the show. So join me again after the break.
You are watching Property TV. You are watching Property TV.
Hello and welcome back to Property Question Time with Hayley Andrews and Ben Stroud. So, Hayley, your second question. In previous editions of Property Question Time, I've heard that the new permitted development rights regulations permit change of use to residential from commercial use. Can the panel tell me what the possible objections or difficulties I might face are if I were to undertake such a development project? That's a bit technical for you, isn't it?
So the new Class MA is where you've grouped together A1, A2, A3, B1, D1A, D1, B and D2. I think that's all of them. May have missed a few.
Us there, Ben. I can see you looking blank as well. Yeah.
But, so this is all now part of the new Class MA. But anybody looking to do a development under Class MA should always go to the local planning authority and make sure that they don't need prior approval. Because what I'm seeing is there are a lot of restrictions. And a lot of people are just assuming that they can do it, and it's not always the case. You have to make sure that you talk to a planning consultant or go to the local planning authority and have that conversation with them, because you may need prior approval. And some of the objections, or where it's not permitted, is if the property is over 1,500 square metres. So the part that you're looking to change to residential, because that's what we're talking about here, commercial to C3 residential dwelling. Other places where it's not permitted would be Article 4 area, if the property falls inside of an Article 4 area, if it's conservation area as well. Also, if the building has any special interests. So if the building is listed, doesn't matter what grade 1, grade 2, grade 2 star. Locally listed. So there's lots and lots of things that you need to be aware of, and there's lots of conditions under the new Class MA where actually it isn't permitted. So always check with the local planning authority, or have that conversation with a planning consultant prior to putting anything forward, and prior to financially committing yourself to anything. Even if that is actually all okay and you're able to do it, there's also special conditions as well, such as transport impact, noise impact to the residents once the development has been completed, all things like that. So there's lots and lots of considerations that have to be taken into place. I think one of the things I'm seeing the most, and I'm actually going through this currently myself, is, and I sat down last week with regeneration team, the head of the regeneration team in one of the areas that I operate in. And what we are seeing is, while under the new MA class, we can go for change of use within 56 days. Actually, the planning departments are just absolutely slammed, and we've got huge backlogs, especially in the areas that I'm operating in anyway, and I fear that it's the same across the whole of England. But what we are seeing is planning departments where they have a workload of 6 to 8 planning consultants. They actually have one person doing that job. So there's a huge backlog, and while it is 56 days, actually they can ask for an extension, and they will. So it's not really that much quicker.
Well, I think that the interesting thing is, I mean, Generic brought these things in under his tenure. I think that was our 12th housing minister in about 10 years. But anyway,
aren't we on 13?
I think we're on 13 now. Yeah. But they were saying that people are viewing this as because the word rights is included in the title, they're considering it to be a right. Actually, it's just an attitude that the council has, isn't it?
And not every council has the same attitude as well. So
well, certainly in London here, a lot of the councils are just saying, "Lovely, thanks very much, Mr. Generic, but no thanks."
Yes, and that's what's happening quite a lot. And it's a very archaic system, the planning system, and they bring these wonderful things in to speed up the process, but unfortunately, on a national level, on a local level, it's just completely slowed down.
Well, I suppose the other complication, Hayley, is, and this is something I've complained about for years, do you really think that in today's world of complex development, very high-tech development, very complicated planning issues, do you think really that sort of 11 or 12 lay people sitting in a council are the right people to make these judgments? And I think not a lot of the time.
I mean, it's an opinion, isn't it? But I personally agree with you.
Yeah. I mean, I don't wish to sort of undermine any work that councillors do. They do it in a lot of cases free. They give their time to their local community and everything else. But I think we're in a different era now. Yes. I think we need complex and clever minds.
We need a simple system that's not one size fits all, but a national standard, as we've spoken about before, and that needs to be followed on a local level.
Yeah, I mean, Ben, you're operating in an area which is very modern at the moment. I can remember driving by, well, in fact, involved in a development only 2 seconds from the Westway, looking over the wasteland that your people have now developed to the nth degree, haven't they? There, Paddington's looking really high tech and hot.
It's changed a lot.
Hot.
Yeah, it's changed.
Which
a
presumably
lot.
Is why you've gone there to run your business.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're new build specialists, so we don't deal so much. I was a little bit silent during that section because I'm definitely not a technical expert when it comes to commercial to residential conversions. Where we are, there's a lot of new build regen at the end of the basin where there used to be a lot of warehousing, where the canal boats dropped off and picked up, and now it's changed. But the other pain point, I do speak to developers. I have friends that develop anything from a house to building a block of flats. And the other pain point at the moment, beyond just a slow planning, an archaic planning system, is build costs. I know they've skyrocketed, and sites that were feasible, a year ago now aren't.
I was going to say even 12 months ago. Yeah,
it's that's almost their biggest headache right now. Maybe even more than local councils, but it's challenging.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And from materials point of view, I've had builders that have worked with me for years come back, and we've had to revise. The costs that we put aside. We put contingencies and things like that in place, but we're looking at least 25% higher than originally quoted. So that eats right into your 20%. There's a lot of sites now that you're seeing with planning permission that are coming back to the market. So be careful of that, because that's one of the reasons why they're coming back too.
Okay, well, on the subject of the future, Ben, your second question.
Yeah.
The property market has remained surprisingly buoyant throughout the COVID pandemic. There have also been various incentives to keep the market live throughout this period. However, October will see the end of stamp duty concessions, and various Help to Buy schemes have tailed off too. Will this cause a crash in the market for late 21-22?
I think market health relies on a variety of things. Availability and cost of mortgage finance, arguably being the most important thing, which at the moment is still pretty plentiful. I think in the regions, the outskirts of London and the regions, relative to the cost of a property, the loss of a £15,000 stamp duty incentive, or up to £15,000 saving, which was the maximum, it's a bigger chunk of the property value than if you compare it to central London. So I think there's two-tier answer. One, outskirts of London, the regions, I think it won't be a crash at all. It might cause a slight flattening out of prices. I think in central London, losing, if you're spending £2 million and paying, say, 200,000 in stamp, having to pay 15,000 less, 15,000 more probably isn't going to put you off that purchase. And if you look at central London, it's had a pretty tough 7 years anyway, starting with stamp duty increases, heading into Brexit and all the uncertainty surrounding that, and then finally COVID. So the recent peak in prices was the end of 2014, and we've seen a steady decline since then. So what we're seeing is people looking at central London, a lot of people deciding it's actually an interesting time to buy, and then a £15,000 increase in stamp won't deter them. I don't feel there's a crash coming either way, whether it's London or the regions, but more likely to have an effect on the outskirts.
Okay, good stuff. Well, on that happy note, we'll end the show. So I'm going to say thank you very much to Hayley Andrews. Thank you for coming in, Hayley. Ben Stroud, thank you very much for coming in and contributing. So that's all we have time for today. I'm Stephen Galpin. Join me again next time on Property Question Time.